There is a statue in a museum case in Middlesbrough that nobody quite knows what to make of. It is squat, worn smooth in places, ambiguous in form, and faintly unsettling in the way that very old things with faces tend to be. It was not excavated. It was not carefully recorded. It eroded out of a cliff on the northeast English coast in 1886 and was found sitting upright on the beach, as if it had simply decided to appear. No context, no associated finds, no stratigraphic record of any kind. Just a strange stone figure and a coastline that had swallowed whatever explanation might have come with it. For over a century, nobody could say with any confidence what it was, how old it was, or what it was for. New scientific analysis has now entered that conversation. What it reveals does not close the mystery. It makes the mystery considerably more interesting. Huntcliffe rises out of the northeast English coast near Saltburn by the sea, a dramatically eroding headland of sandstone and shale that has been slowly surrendering itself to the North Sea for as long as anyone has been watching. It is the kind of coastline that feels geological in its indifference to human presence. Cliffs collapse here on their own schedule, and what they contain comes out when they decide, not when archaeologists would prefer. In 1886, what emerged was a squat sandstone figure found sitting upright on the beach at the base of the cliff, apparently having simply eroded free from the rock above. Nobody saw it fall. Nobody excavated the surrounding material. Nobody recorded what layer it had come from, or what, if anything, had been buried alongside it. It was just there, perched on the sand, as if waiting to be collected. That absence of context is not a minor inconvenience. In archaeology, association is everything. The relationship between an object and its surroundings, what sits above it, below it, beside it, is frequently the only reliable evidence available for establishing date, function, and meaning. The Huntcliffe figure arrived without any of that. Whatever story the cliff had been keeping, it kept. What happened next is either charming or catastrophic, depending on your relationship with archaeological preservation standards. Rather than being shipped to a museum for analysis, the figure was placed on a pedestal outside the Ship Inn, a 16th century pub in Old Saltburn, with a reputation that had nothing to do with careful curation. The Ship Inn was smuggling country. Local history connects it to John Andrew, sometimes called the King of the Smugglers, a figure whose story had been embellished so thoroughly by 1872 that separating fact from folklore requires more patience than the evidence probably deserves. What is documented is that a Mr. Temple was running the pub in 1886, that he was navigating bankruptcy proceedings by 1885, and that placing a potentially prehistoric stone figure on a pedestal outside your establishment is, at minimum, an unconventional marketing strategy. There, it stood for decades. North Sea salt spray, coastal frost, industrial soot, and the general entropy of a working pub environment worked on it continuously. A figure that may have survived 4,000 years inside a cliff spent the better part of a century being weathered by conditions considerably less forgiving. It was transferred to Middlesbrough Museum in the 1980s. The pedestal, apparently, stayed behind. The figure itself rewards close attention, though it does not reward confident conclusions. It is squat and rounded, more symbolic than realistic, the kind of form that suggests a human being rather than depicting one with any anatomical precision. The head, or what remains of it, has been so thoroughly worked over by weathering that whatever hair, headdress, or facial detail it once carried has largely gone. What has survived is the body, a rounded abdomen, pronounced thighs, a general silhouette that has prompted repeated and serious scholarly argument about whether what is being depicted is pregnancy. If it is, the figure shifts category entirely, from ambiguous humanoid to deliberate fertility symbol, which is a significant interpretive distance to travel on the basis of a weathered stone torso. The location adds another layer. Huntcliffe is a headland, a place where land commits to becoming sea, the precise kind of threshold that prehistoric communities are documented to have treated as symbolically charged. Offerings were deposited at boundaries. Monuments were positioned at margins. Whether this figure was placed there deliberately, with that logic in mind, or simply ended up on a headland, because that is where the geology put it, is a question the object itself declines to answer. The original assumption was the Bronze Age, which would place the figure somewhere in the region of 4,000 years old, roughly contemporary with Stonehenge, which would make it potentially one of the oldest surviving human statues in Northern Europe. That assumption was never securely established. It was the default position adopted in the absence of better evidence, which is a different thing entirely from being supported by it. More recent thinking has shifted toward the Iron Age, roughly 800 BCE to the 1st century AD, on the basis of stylistic comparisons to Celtic stoneheads found across Europe. The Hunt Cliff figure shares certain qualities with that tradition: simplified forms, rounded shapes, stylized rather than realistic human features. The comparison is plausible, but it is not proof. Stylistic similarity is one of the more treacherous tools in archaeological interpretation, because things can look alike for reasons that have nothing to do with shared origin or date. Complicating matters further is the Roman signal station that occupied the same headland in the late 4th century AD. From its excavated well came 14 skeletons, men, women, and children, which raises questions the archaeology has never fully answered. Nothing links the carving directly to Roman activity, but it was there, and they were there, and that proximity refuses to disappear quietly. Here is where the story shifts from accumulated uncertainty to something more precise. The same methodological turn that has been rewriting prehistoric timelines across Britain and Europe, moving away from assumption-based dating toward direct material analysis, has now been applied to the Hunt Cliff figure. The stone itself can be interrogated in ways that stylistic comparison cannot match. Where did the raw material come from? How has it worked? What does the surface tell us about the tools that shaped it and the conditions it was shaped in? These are questions that do not require context that was lost on a beach in 1886, because the answers are contained within the object itself. What the analysis indicates is a narrowing, not a clean resolution, because the evidence does not support one, but a meaningful reduction in the range of serious possibilities. Certain dates become considerably less defensible. Certain cultural contexts become considerably more probable. The Bronze Age assumption that held for over a century turns out to have been exactly that, an assumption, and the material evidence does not support it with any conviction. What it does support points in a different direction, not toward a tidy answer, but toward a more honest and better evidenced understanding of what this object most likely is and when it was most likely made. Taken together, the evidence points most credibly toward an Iron Age origin. The stylistic profile aligns with the Celtic stonehead tradition found across Northern Europe. The material analysis is consistent with that time frame. The headland location fits the documented pattern of Iron Age communities, marking symbolically significant thresholds with carved figures. None of this is certain. The function remains genuinely unknown. Whether it depicted a specific individual, embodied a deity, marked a boundary, or served a purpose that has no clean modern category, is a question the figure is not going to answer. What can be said is that the Bronze Age attribution that dominated for over a century was built on assumption rather than evidence, and the evidence that now exists does not support it. The Iron Age reading is more defensible, better supported, and still incomplete. That incompleteness is not a failure. It is an accurate reflection of what survives. An object stripped of context by a collapsing cliff, weathered by centuries inside sandstone and decades outside a smuggler's pub, has no obligation to be legible. The Hunt Cliff figure has lasted this long on its own terms. The fact that those terms remain partially opaque to us is, on reflection, entirely appropriate for something this old and this stubborn. British prehistory has a habit of turning up in unexpected places, not always beneath carefully managed heritage sites with visitor centers and explanatory signage, sometimes eroding out of a cliff on the northeast coast and spending decades outside a pub before anyone thinks to ask serious questions about it. The Hunt Cliff figure is not Stonehenge. It will not rewrite textbooks or anchor a national conversation about ancient identity. What it does is something quieter and in its own way more interesting. It demonstrates that the prehistoric record is still incomplete in ways we have not fully mapped, that objects can survive in plain sight for over a century while their real story remains inasked, and that better questions, even when they do not produce clean answers, are worth the effort of asking. The science did not solve the Hunt Cliff figure. It revealed that the figure was always more interesting than the assumptions that had been standing in for understanding it.